In my struggle with Annika at the mall, a part of me wanted to cough up $100 just to make her happy and feel loved. But another part of me knew that wasn't the right decision for our family. And that you and I, honey, we'd made an agreement around our clothing budget, but I was struggling to decide how to respond to Annika's expectation and her request. I was also experiencing some really tough emotions inside, some insecurities and some fear.
Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your stepfamily from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of stepfamily life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Well, hello there, my friend. Thank you so much for being here and joining us for this episode today.
Welcome, welcome.
Absolutely. You know what? This episode drops on May 10th, 2022, which is right in between Mother's Day and Stepmother's Day.
Woohoo!
Awesome. Maybe you didn't know that this coming Sunday is a day set aside just to celebrate stepmoms. So if last Sunday was a little rough, which sometimes it can be, then maybe try again this week.
Yeah, you have a do-over.
See how you can do that. Yeah, because we know that all those stepmoms out there are really putting in effort and really care about loving their family well.
Yeah, they
And
deserve to be honored.
That's right. We want to celebrate you. I'm a little jealous because there's no such thing as Stepfather's Day.
I know, there should be.
Deal with that. I put in effort too. Good grief. Well, hey, we need to just get moving on with this before I totally derail this episode, right? But first, if you're not following the podcast yet on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen, I want to encourage you to do that because you know what? Every other week, we drop a simple step and we don't put it anywhere else. And so if you're not following the podcast, you're probably missing those simple steps, and we don't want you to miss out on those. So make sure you follow. And if you have an opportunity, give us a little star rating wherever you're listening. Maybe in Apple Podcasts, leave us a review.
Yeah.
We would love to hear from you, and we'd love to hear your feedback.
Yeah, we read all of your reviews.
That's right.
And consider all of your ideas. So thank you for those of you who have reached out.
Absolutely.
All right. So today we're excited to talk about effective decision making.
Oh, awesome.
Which might sound simple, but if you've been living in blended family dynamics, you've probably realized how complicated it can be to make decisions and stay connected as a couple. This is challenging. And it tends to be a really big stress point for most blended family couples. Even when the decision is something small, like if a child should be allowed to be excused from the dinner table when they're done eating, or if they should stay seated at the table until everyone is finished up and dinner time is officially over.
They should definitely stay seated. I mean, come on.
No, they can go.
What are you talking about?
Why should they have to stay? See, these little things.
Or maybe there's bigger decisions around things like visitation schedules or finances, those kinds of decisions that might impact the whole family in one form or another. That can get really complicated. Like, well, what additional resources should be allocated to a child when we're already paying a ton of money every month for child support to somebody's former spouse? Or how accommodating should we be when there's this request for a schedule change when we already don't get enough time with our kid? You know?
You know, we've helped step couples navigate hundreds of decisions.
Maybe thousands.
Big ones and small ones over the years. And we know the challenges that come up when decisions need to be made. Often there are outside forces that add a lot of pressure and some expectation to our decision-making process. We might experience some underlying emotions like guilt or fear. It can get really confusing sometimes, right?
For sure.
We found that it can get really confusing sometimes, and we might feel like we have to choose sides.
Yeah, and you know, honey, you just said that we know how challenging this can be, And that's because we've struggled for years around how to make decisions for our blended family and stay connected and united as a couple.
That's right.
Yeah.
And many times decision making for us led to a whole lot of tension, conflict, and like you just said, disconnection.
Yeah.
We couldn't stay connected. Now, back in episode 21, we talked about the trapped teammate, stranded stranger experience, and we shared about our biggest fight ever.
Yes.
It was an epic fight, and it was triggered by a series of decisions that put us on opposite ends of an experiential divide. We were against each other. We were no longer for each other, and we certainly weren't working as a team.
Oh, that's for sure. Why don't we do a quick recap of that story for our listeners, honey?
Sure. So essentially, I made a parenting decision that deviated from an agreement, honey, that you and I had made ahead of time.
Yeah, I remember.
That was the crux, right? So prior to a family camping trip, you and I agreed about some boundaries I was going to put in place around my daughter Annika's cell phone usage. Now, she was a teenager at the time.
Yep.
However, in the middle of the trip, I was feeling like a trapped teammate. I really did want to uphold our original agreement, which was good.
Yep.
But Annika started feeling sick with a cold, and so I also wanted to accommodate her need for comfort. So in my own emotion of sympathy for her and even some guilt and pressure, I made a unilateral decision without talking to you, honey.
Yep.
And I backtracked on our agreement. So instead, I decided to allow Annika to use her phone over and above the boundary that we had agreed to and had set with her. That's what happened.
That's right. And when you made that decision, I quickly became the stranded stranger.
Right.
I felt abandoned. I felt left out of the decision-making process. And so in my frustration, I also made a decision. I decided the trip was over 3 days early.
You did.
Right? I was feeling disregarded and hurt, and I didn't know how to regulate my emotions very well back then. So I just ended up getting really angry, and I started packing up all of our stuff, and I proceeded to end the family vacation. That was my unilateral decision. I said and I did a whole lot of things that I still regret today, which led us to a big standoff.
Oh, yeah.
Our relationship was filled with stress and conflict that all of our kids were witness to for a long time after that, several days in this particular fight.
Yeah.
The emotions we each experienced as you being that trapped teammate and me being the stranded stranger, as well as those individual decisions that we made, created disconnection and conflict. And our inability to navigate it as a team ruined what was supposed to be a fun-filled family experience.
Yeah, it was so awful.
It was.
Now, we had already been struggling in our marriage at this point.
Right.
And that trip was kind of the final straw that almost broke us.
Yeah.
When we got home, we were on the verge of separation. And at that point, we'd been married and blending for about 10 years. And over those years, there had been so many decisions made.
Yeah, a lot.
Over and over again, we ran into different situations that put us into that trapped teammate, stranded stranger dynamic. And then we experienced a lot of pain and conflict.
Totally. And eventually, we learned that this dynamic is actually quite common for blended family couples, and it's just about impossible to completely eradicate it.
Right. We still struggle with it
We
once
do
in a while.
sometimes, yeah. You know, every blended family couple that we've ever talked to about the stranded stranger trapped teammate dynamic has reported feeling it to some degree or another.
Yeah.
And one challenging aspect of this dynamic is that it can keep us stuck in opposing camps, so to speak. It's not a play on words from our camping story, but it's just our opposing camps, right? Each time a decision needs to be made about parenting his kids or her kids, or sometimes when a decision needs to be made about handling her ex or his ex, most couples find themselves on opposite ends of that experiential divide you were talking about earlier. They end up feeling disconnected, and they struggle to empathize with each other's pain of being stranded on the outside or trapped in the middle. What if you could experience a community that's all about healthy support, guidance, and practical strategies that help you thrive in your blended family? Well, now you can. Blending Together is a supportive community for blended family couples just like you.
We've educated and supported hundreds of couples navigating the unique challenges of blending a family. Now we're inviting you to join our community and experience the transformation that awaits you. But you'll need to act fast because we're getting started soon. Blending Together is not just another community. It's a place where you'll find practical, real-life strategies for building unity as a couple.
And creating more connection as a family.
Experiencing partnership in parenting.
And even dealing with that difficult ex.
Blending Together is a safe, growth-focused space where you get to connect with us and, maybe more importantly, with other blended family couples who truly understand what you're going through. Along the way, you'll discover practical tools, guidance, and hope that empower you to find a future full of confidence and connection.
When you join Blending Together, you'll get to hop into a variety of resources like access to our private Facebook group and online learning platform, monthly coaching meetings, monthly Q&As, and you'll even get to vote on the content for our monthly workshops.
Blending a family can often leave couples feeling alone or isolated and stuck, and quality support can sometimes be expensive. That's why we're offering you access to all of this at a super low monthly rate, because every blended family deserves the opportunity to thrive, regardless of their budget.
That's right. So join us in the Blending Together community and unlock the secrets to successful blending. Together, we can create a future filled with hope, connection, and peace. But don't wait. Click the link in the show notes now. The doors will be closing on October 8th, and you don't want to miss out on this unique opportunity to create the future you really want alongside other couples who genuinely get it. Hey, we can't wait to meet you there.
That's right. I've felt like a trapped teammate countless times over the past 21 years. And the trapped teammate just wants everyone to be happy. So when a decision needs to be made, they can easily feel trapped when they realize, they aren't going to be able to please everyone.
Right.
No matter what decision they make, someone is going to be disappointed or upset with them. And there's going to be some relational tension that comes along with that. Now, on our disastrous trip, if I had made the decision to stick to our agreement, honey, and said no to Annika when she was feeling sick, miserable, and bored, and wanting to use her phone more than the allotted time, well then, guess what? She would have been upset and probably pretty mad at me.
Right.
And then I would have had to put up with her grumbling and bad attitude for the rest of the trip.
Right.
And I really wanted to avoid that. And I wanted Annika to be content. But that meant that I'd be breaking my agreement with you. So someone was going to be upset with me one way or the other, whatever decision I made.
Yeah.
And this is the pain of the trapped teammate. You kind of feel like that rope in a game of tug of war that's being stretched between your kids and your spouse, and you're about to get snapped by someone you love and care for.
It's
tough. Really
That's
tough.
Right.
Yeah.
And, I felt like the stranded stranger countless times over the years, too. And the stranded stranger gets that emotional kick to the gut every time they feel like they're a bit of a stranger in their own home. They want so much to be acknowledged and included in all the things that are going on, especially when it comes to decision making. But the reality is they often get excluded or overlooked when decisions are made simply because of their position as a step parent or a second spouse. On that disastrous camping trip, I had some expectations about what our family time was going to look like, that connection that I was hoping that we were going to build. And as you may know, pulling off a successful camping trip takes a lot of energy and effort, right? I put a lot of energy and effort into it. And my goal was to create an environment that was free from distractions like those pesky cell phones.
Right.
So that way we would get to experience some quality bonding time and create some meaningful moments and special memories as a family. That's my focus.
Yeah, it was a good expectation.
Yeah, none of those are bad things. But of course, when you made the decision to backtrack on that cell phone boundary with Annika that we had agreed to, I experienced a ton of frustration because it felt like my high expectations around the trip were just shattered. And so I was disappointed and I was angry.
Yeah, rightfully so.
Exactly.
So that's the nutshell description of the trapped teammate, stranded stranger dynamic and how it can sabotage our connection as a couple and create a lot of stressful fallout for the whole blended family.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a much deeper dive in a 4-part series starting at episode 21 that was all about how to understand the impact that this has on all of us. And we offered some ideas of how you can minimize the pain, the frustration, and relational disconnection that most of us tend to experience.
Yep.
And we'll put links to those episodes in the show notes if you haven't already listened to them or if you need a review.
Yeah, we always need a review.
Yeah. But today, we're going to focus on a different facet of the trapped teammate, stranded stranger dynamic around decision making. And we want to offer you some helpful tips to keep you connected when a decision needs to be made, which is a lot of the time.
A lot of the time, absolutely. You know, discovering some of the things that we're talking about today has literally been a game changer for our relationship. And we're confident that they can make a big difference for you too.
Absolutely.
We've noticed that there are 2 specific areas of blended family life where decision making gets really complicated and often stressful.
Mm-hmm.
The first one's with our kids. So when our kids are coming to us, they're asking us to make a decision that might impact our spouse or others in our blended family. That's the bio parent getting asked by a bio kid.
Right.
The second one is a former spouse when they come in with some kind of request or even a demand and they want an answer.
Right.
In both scenarios, that bio parent who's receiving these requests and needs to make a decision might experience pressure and the weight of meeting the expectations of others, whether it's their bio child or their former spouse. Those are 2 major areas where this can be really challenging.
Right. I feel that pain.
Yep.
So many emotional struggles can get stirred up when this happens, especially if we know that our current spouse will probably want to weigh in on this decision and they might have a different perspective on this request than the person presenting the request, right?
Oh, I never did that to you, did I?
Oh, never. And, you know, as the trapped teammate, we really don't want to have to let anyone down. And we also don't want to rock the boat. We want to be the peacekeeper, right? And I remember one specific situation with Annika going into the summer season, and she needed a new swimsuit.
Oh, boy, the swimsuit.
Oh, yeah, yes. It was a struggle.
The swimsuit incident of 2000,
yeah,
whatever it was.
Whenever. It was bad. Now, honey, you and I had a detailed budget and a specific allocation for clothing for all the kids. And our limit for a new swimsuit for Annika was $35.
Yeah. And you know what? I think this was right around the time we actually started getting united around our financial budget.
We were excited about it.
This was kind of new for us too.
Yeah. And you know, $35 for a swimsuit is very reasonable. I don't even spend that much on a swimsuit for myself most times.
You still don't.
I know.
That's kind of funny.
But when I got to the mall with Annika, she wasn't interested in shopping at Target or Old Navy, where a $35 budget is very doable, right? She wanted to go to those high-end specialty stores where her stepmom had taken her, and she wanted to buy the exact same swimsuit that her stepmom had purchased for her. You know, I don't know. For some reason, she had it in her mind that she had to duplicate that same suit at both homes.
Yeah, that happens a lot. And there's a whole other discussion there about stepmom buying stuff and all that, but that's not where we're focused today.
Yeah.
However, that's when you learned that the swimsuit that she expected to buy on that day was a big time budget breaker.
Oh,
Did you agree with that? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because you had to purchase each piece separately and they were outrageously overpriced. And so the bottom line was that Annika was pressuring me to cough up over $100 at this specialty store so that she could have the same swimming ensemble that her stepmom had purchased for her. I mean, ugh.
And I think she was like 12, 13, which also meant that that's only going to last one season.
Yeah, she's still growing.
Yeah, and our swimming season here in the Northwest is like 3 weeks.
Yeah. To me, that was just such a big waste of money.
Yeah. Okay, so that's just one example, right?
Yeah.
Our kids make dozens of requests from us every single week, from buying new clothing or games or cosmetics or whatever it is that they're wanting in order to support them in all the kinds of things that are important to them, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Activities, all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And even daily decisions around bedtime, food, homework, privacy issues, sharing, behavioral expectations, consequences, on and on and on, right? We like to think that, we're the parent and we're the ones in control. But the truth is that our kids have a great deal of influence on our decision-making process. They pull on our emotional heartstrings, and, we want the best for them. So this is natural. In my struggle with Annika at the mall, a part of me wanted to cough up $100 just to make her happy and feel loved and cared for.
Yep.
But another part of me knew that wasn't the right decision for our family. And that you and I, honey, we'd made an agreement around our clothing budget, and that agreement was really reasonable.
Right.
But I was struggling to decide how to respond to Annika's expectation and her request, which was kind of more of a demand, really.
Sometimes she gets that way. Well, so do I.
She had her heart set on that. And, this sent me into a pain point of being the trapped teammate. I was also experiencing some really tough emotions inside, some insecurities and some fear. If I didn't give in to Annika and buy the swimsuit she wanted, would she feel that I was scrimping out on her? Or would she think I wasn't generous or didn't care about what she really wanted? Unlike her stepmom, who'd been extremely generous and let her buy whatever she wanted.
Yeah.
It was a really tough day at the mall for me.
Yeah, I mean,
it's bringing flashbacks.
Isn't it crazy how just that what seems like should be a simple decision suddenly becomes really complicated?
Yeah, I mean, I remember sitting on a bench and just having a meltdown. It was really hard.
Yeah, I can imagine. As a bio parent, it can be a real struggle when it comes to decision making with their kids. But the struggle often happens with the former spouse as well when they make a request.
Right.
I'm thinking of a couple that we recently coached where the husband's son was in the band at school. And as the school year was approaching, his ex-wife called him from the music store in the moment to say, hey, how much money are you going to kick in toward this new instrument that our son's going to need for the band?
Okay, so here's the ex-wife. She's actually at the store wanting to purchase a really expensive instrument, and she's expecting him to commit to forking up some money right there on the spot for the purpose of their son's participation in band. Wow. Talk about pressure and conflicting emotions for this poor bio dad. And, if I were to put myself in his shoes, I'd probably be wondering things like, if I say no to this, what will my son think? Will he think I'm not being supportive? Will my ex get really frustrated with me and then say something negative about me in front of my son or to my son?
Yeah.
I mean, this is the kind of situation that can trigger a lot of fear and insecurity for a parent. I've been there. It's hard.
Yeah.
When there's this looming expectation, and you're worried that if you don't meet or exceed that expectation, you'll be labeled as a bad or unsupportive parent.
Oh, yeah.
That's a valid fear.
Fear, yeah, for sure. And then on the flip side, he's probably thinking that if he simply agrees to pay the money, knowing that he hasn't talked to his current spouse about the budget yet, now he's trapped between his ex and his son on the other end of the phone, and how this decision is going to impact his current marriage.
Right.
And of course, as we were talking to this couple, we also heard from his current wife because she had her own perspective on this situation, right? Because as it was, this husband, he did go ahead and he did agree to contribute several $100s toward the instrument without consulting her. And since that money wasn't in their budget, she's now feeling frustrated and experiencing the pain of feeling like a stranded stranger. She didn't have any input into the decision. So his decision with his ex has impacted her and their family's financial picture. And then on top of that, this husband's been more than responsible in paying child support every single month. And she's going, shouldn't that money be used for stuff like this?
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm sure many, if not all of our listeners can relate to these examples or similar situations where the decision-making process brought about some tough and confusing emotions and catapulted you into this dilemma of being either a trapped teammate or a stranded stranger, which ultimately led to disagreement, frustration, and disconnection in your relationship.
Yeah.
So how in the world do you handle this, right? Well, we're glad you asked.
That's right.
We're going to jump in and talk about some practical tips around how you can handle these kinds of tough situations in your family and stay connected. That's what we want for you.
Yeah, and guess what? I love practical tips.
You do.
Right? I do. I'm all about it. How about we share some of the do's and the don'ts when it comes to developing decisions in both blended family parenting and working with ex-spouses.
Right.
That way you can stay united as a couple and actually minimize the tension. Okay?
Let's do that.
Let's start with the don'ts. I always like to start with the don'ts first.
Yeah, get those out of the way.
Yeah. First, and maybe most importantly, don't succumb to pressure. I've noticed that often when a decision point hits, as parents or when we're dealing with an ex, we can often feel this pressure to have to offer some kind of an answer right away, like immediately. Usually there is pressure, right, on that. But if we really examine most of the decisions that we have to make in either arena, much of the time, those decisions don't have to be made right there on the spot.
Right.
They're not actually as urgent as they might feel in the moment. The reality and the feeling are two different things. Now, it's true that the people making the requests can do some things that cause us to feel like we have to give them an answer right away, like right now, because they want an answer right now.
Yeah, they want what they want.
But in all actuality, waiting a few hours or even a couple days often isn't as critical to the outcome of the decision as it might feel.
Right. That's exactly right. And we need to keep in mind that kids who spend time in a single parent home are used to getting an answer right away, right?
That's right.
Because a single parent really doesn't have to consult with anyone else before making decisions that don't involve that other home.
Right.
And that habit of just making decisions on the spot, that follows the parent and their kids into their new blended family dynamic.
For sure.
And unfortunately, this means that the new spouse gets left out of the process.
That's right. So we're just kind of doing what we've always done.
So rather than falling victim to the pressure that you might feel to give an answer right then and there, we encourage you to respond with something like this. Listen, honey, I can see that having a swimsuit you feel good in is really important to you, and I want that for you. But I need some time to consider all the options. Let's go to a few other stores and see what else we can find. Now, this response gave me some time to pull away from that pressure-filled moment in the specialty store so that I could calm my own emotions and then look for some other alternative ideas. Now, of course, Annika wasn't very excited about this. Like any kid, she's impulsive, and she knew what she wanted and just wanted me to buy the suit right then and there. But I resisted the pressure. I tolerated her objections and gave myself a little time to process what I should do next.
Yeah, that's really good. And that principle of not succumbing to the pressure applies to an ex-spouse as well. You can respectfully and calmly affirm them by acknowledging that whatever it is they're proposing is important to them, right? And then, you can let them know that you'll need some time. You can need to think about it and give them a specific time that you'll get back to them by. One thing you don't want to do is just leave them hanging of, I'll decide later.
Right.
Give them a time frame. And you might just simply ask for a little bit of time. You might say something like, hey, I know it's important for Johnny to have an instrument for the band this year. I can't give you an answer right this minute, but I can tell you later this evening after I've had a chance to look at my budget.
Mm-hmm.
This can alleviate the pressure and give you an opportunity to consult with your spouse. Now, notice I said I'd take a little time to look at my budget. Don't blame your new spouse to your ex-spouse.
Yeah.
You take the brunt of that, but still buy a little time.
Don't throw your spouse under the bus in either of these scenarios.
Right.
I didn't say to Annika, oh, Mike said I have to stick to the budget, so you can't have that
yeah,
suit.
Exactly. Yeah, don't do any of that.
Protect your spouse.
Yeah, but at the same time, don't succumb to the pressure, not with your kids or with your ex, even if it makes them a little bit unhappy in the moment. It'll buy you the time you need to develop your decision as a team with your current spouse. And if you needed some additional tips and encouragement around negotiating with an ex, make sure you meet us back here in a couple of weeks because we're going to be talking about how to make good decisions when negotiations with an ex gets a bit heated.
Yes, I have lots of experience with that. And in the meantime, you might want to check out episode 95, which offers 5 practical tips around negotiating schedule changes with your ex. And we'll put
a common one.
Yep, and we'll put a link in the show notes for that.
For sure.
All right, on to the next don't.
All right.
The next one is don't avoid.
Oh, I love it when you say that.
Yeah, you know, honey, I used to be a classic avoider, especially when I was struggling with difficult emotions. But sidestepping or avoiding a decision will almost always result in more pain in the bigger picture in the long run.
Yep.
When I made that fateful decision on our camping trip to deviate from the agreement, I was in avoidance mode. Part of this was because I was also sick and exhausted from being up all night coughing. So I allowed fatigue to become kind of an excuse to just avoid the issue. I love this quote from Richard Bach. Avoid problems and you'll never be the one who overcame them.
That's really good.
I've learned that over the years, I think.
Yeah.
Now, I was facing a problem on that trip. And instead of talking it over with you, honey, and working together to overcome the problem, I tried to avoid it. Now, I've learned the hard way over the years that running away from your problems is a race that you'll never win. So don't avoid the problem you're facing, and don't avoid your negative emotions either.
Yeah, you know, if you'd come to me on that trip, honey, and just shared what was going on for you, things might have turned out pretty differently for us.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
You know, I could have been honest, and I could have said something like, listen, honey, I know we agreed on a limit for Annika's phone usage during our trip, and that was a great idea at the time. But things have changed, and now that she's sick and feeling miserable and really bored, I think we need to revisit the discussion and talk about adjusting the boundary. I really want her to be content. I'm also feeling really tired and lousy, and I'm just not up to enforcing that original agreement right now. Would you be willing to talk with me about that?
Yeah, you know, that would have been helpful. I'm pretty sure that I would have been open to a productive conversation. We never know going back in time, because I know we were already struggling in our relationship at the time. But man, that would have been such a better chance.
Would have been so much
to
better.
Navigate that.
Yeah.
Had you taken that approach and not avoided the issue, I probably wouldn't have felt like a stranded stranger. And I wouldn't have jumped to a lot of negative stories in my head about you and about Annika.
Right.
And so that may have really helped me to lower my expectations around the whole family connection time thing, and probably be able to pivot and focus on some other things.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So don't avoid. A wise person once said, life is about decisions. You either make them or they're made for you, but you can't avoid them.
Yeah, that's really good.
That's a reality check for all of us.
Yep.
All right. So what's the next don't, honey?
Okay. The next don't is for the step parent or that current spouse. And that's don't overreact.
Oh, yeah. That's
I can't believe I'm saying that, but hey.
I'd love to hear you say that.
Yeah. You know, when your spouse comes to you with a decision that they need to make regarding one of their kids or their former spouse, do your best to stay calm and listen well. Get into a curiosity mindset.
Right.
It's easy to make quick assumptions or get defensive in these situations, especially if you feel like you've been burned in the past or if you're harboring any resentments. But your overreaction to these sensitive issues around decision making might be the very reason why your spouse is avoiding coming to you in the first place.
Yeah.
So have a little self-control here. And instead of jumping in to interrupt with a rebuttal or an opinion or whatever it is, make the choice to listen and stay open and curious.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, that's actually a choice.
Mm-hmm.
So in a few minutes here, we're going to give you a little hack about what a process of developing decisions as a couple looks like. So when your spouse initially comes to you to share what's going on, you can use that to choose to work with them and not against them in the decision-making process so that you can develop decisions as a united team.
Right.
Chances are everybody listening to this, that's what you really want.
Right. That's what you're after.
Absolutely. And when you do that well, it can really help minimize the impact, that negative impact of that trapped teammate and stranded stranger dynamic.
Yeah. I just want to add in this overreaction, don't. Choose to stay empathetic. Try to put yourself in your spouse's shoes and understand what it is they might be feeling or going through as they're facing this request or this demand from their child or their ex.
Yeah.
Instead of getting hung up on your own emotions, try to understand theirs.
I wonder why this reasonable, rational, decent person that I really love seems to be reacting this way. Man, that's such a great question to ask yourself.
Yeah, that's really helpful mindset. Now, there's something really interesting we found about the trapped teammate, stranded stranger dynamic and how it plays out in a complex blended family.
Oh, yeah, right. That's right. You know, honey, our family's not really considered a complex blended family because only one of us had a child in the beginning of our blend.
Right.
You had Annika. She was 5 at the time. But there were no other kids involved. I didn't have any kids at the time. So you were also the only one who was co-parenting with a former spouse. So in our situation, you were always the trapped teammate and I was always the stranded stranger. But in complex dynamics, where both partners have biological kids that they're blending together, things are a little bit different because now both spouses can sometimes be a trapped teammate and both spouses can sometimes be a stranded stranger.
Exactly.
You know, an example of this one is a couple that we worked with in a complex blended family not too long ago. And they each had biological kids and they were each co-parenting with an ex-spouse. And at our very first meeting, when we asked them to describe some of their biggest pain points, the husband shared that he was frustrated because his wife and her ex-husband made decisions without his input. And these decisions had a pretty significant impact on their home. I think his exact words were, "I'm tired of how their decisions dictate our home. It's my home too." Right? He was obviously feeling like a stranded stranger.
Yes. I remember that. He was in a lot of pain. But his wife was also experiencing pain, and she shared that her husband had made the decision to allow his adult son and his family, so the son, the son's wife, and their small child, to move into their home so that they could save money to buy their own home. And this wife explained that she wasn't necessarily opposed to helping her stepson and his family out in this way, but that she was upset because her husband hadn't even talked to her or discussed this decision prior to giving his son the go-ahead. And now she was frustrated with the way that this was impacting their home. And she was also feeling like a stranded stranger. So they were both stranded strangers because of decisions that were being made.
And the funny thing about couples that are in these complex dynamics is that when they're each stuck in their own individual pain as a stranded stranger, that pain tends to overshadow any empathy or understanding that they might have toward each other. It's kind of almost counterintuitive. We would think we'd be able to understand each other. But as expert Patricia Paper now says, pain easily trumps empathy. Like when we're in pain, We're just not in a mindset to have empathy for each other. And it's the same thing when they're both feeling like trapped teammates, because that's going to happen in a complex dynamic. Both partners are going to experience the pain of being both a stranded stranger and a trapped teammate somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
And it's challenging to try to empathize with each other, even though both partners are experiencing similar pain points.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one of the reasons why it's so easy to overreact, but we want to be able to maintain our composure and not overreact. Now, I know that might be easier said than done. And now that we're like 21 years in, I can look back on plenty of things that I overreacted to that in the grand scheme of things really didn't have that much of a lasting impact. So if you need some help processing something that feels really big and painful, don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Mm-hmm.
You can schedule a free coaching call directly with us, and we'd be happy to help you brainstorm that challenge. And we'll put a link in the show notes for you to do just that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are your 3 don'ts. Don't succumb to pressure. Don't avoid, not the decision itself or your own emotions. And don't overreact. So now, honey, let's talk about the do's. This first one is probably the best way that you can avoid the trapped teammate, stranded stranger pain points. And that's do stay connected as a couple and as a family.
It sounds so simple.
It does. Sometimes couples hold on to this mindset that, it'll be easier if we just do our own thing. I'll make decisions that relate to my kids and my ex, and you can handle your kids and your ex. And it does. It sounds so simple, right? But this approach most often creates chaos, disconnection, and lots of conflict.
Yeah, you're right. It might sound simple, but the results are extremely complex. First, if I'm making a decision for my kids and you're making a decision for your kids, guess who the one is comparing notes? It's the kids.
Right.
Right?
They see it all.
How come my stepsister gets to eat Lucky Charms for breakfast and I've got to eat yogurt? Right? Well, why don't they have to keep their room clean? It's not fair. It's not fair. It's not fair. Right? That's what often happens. This approach is going to set your home up for double standards, favoritism traps, and resentments that can sabotage your family's bonding.
Right.
It usually doesn't work.
No. And it can happen when we're making co-parenting decisions with an ex as well, right? Why do you give in to your ex with last-minute scheduling changes that mess up all our plans? I try to stay consistent with visitations so that we can make our plans work and follow through with them.
Oh, you always do it right, huh?
And how come you're so generous with money whenever your ex claims that they're running short? Why is their mismanagement of money our problem? I hold firm boundaries with my ex around money so that we can maintain our family's budget.
Any of that sound familiar? Yeah.
Doing your own thing doesn't work out.
Yeah. So that whole you do your thing, I'll do mine, it can really backfire.
It can.
And not only that, but it doesn't promote familyness. You're kind of just two separate biological camps that happen to be living under the same roof. You aren't really working toward a good blend, which is what the long-term goal should be, right? Staying connected and developing decisions as a team is an intentional decision that all of us need to make.
Absolutely.
So start by just declaring your decision. Declare it right now, wherever you are. Just literally say it out loud. I've decided that I'm going to stay connected. Go ahead. I know the person next to you at the gym or in line at the checkout counter is going to look at you a little weird, but it's worth it. Just declare it right now. You have to make a decision somewhere along the way. Yeah.
Do you think people listen to our podcast in the checkout line?
Maybe I do.
Really? Okay. All right. So declare it out loud. Do it. I'm going to stay connected.
That's right.
And that leads us right into our next do, which is do invite your spouse into your decisions.
There you go.
If you're feeling tempted to exclude your spouse because you don't want to rock the boat or experience conflict, and you think that the best way to do that is to just make the decision yourself, or if you think they really don't need to be involved because It's your kid and your ex, and you should be able to make decisions without their input. Well, when you find yourself in these kind of mindsets, stop and reconsider. Because when you're in that mindset of, I don't need to include my spouse, you're not going to be able to experience unity in your marriage, and you'll always be stuck in those painful dynamics of the trapped teammate and stranded stranger.
That's right. And inviting your spouse into decisions is important, whether you're a complex blended family or a simple blended family like we described a few minutes ago. Just because Annika is your biological child and you were a single parent and you made all the decisions on your own, and even though I didn't bring kids into the relationship, I still needed to be included in making decisions along the way, because decisions that you made regarding Annika impacted our home, and everything that impacted our home also impacted me.
Yeah.
So this applies to agreements that you'd make with your former spouse. It applies to agreements or decisions you need to make around Annika. And when I was excluded from those decisions, it created even more conflict and tension between us and our home than it would have if you would just come to me in the first place and invited me into the process.
Yeah. I remember thinking, I'll just make this decision myself so that I can avoid having to get into it with you.
Yeah.
But again, this tends to backfire because that puts you into the stranded stranger dynamic. So even though I might experience the trapped teammate and feel like I'm that rope in a tug of war between what Annika wanted and what you wanted and your perspectives and preferences around, whatever the issue was, I learned that it was much better for me to kind of tolerate that trapped teammate feeling for just a bit and invite you into the decision-making process because things actually turned out better that way.
Yeah, for everybody, right? And because you were still going to experience being a trapped teammate later on, when I finally realized, wait a second, Kim just made a unilateral decision, that would be upsetting for me. And then we'd have to work through that tension, right?
Right. I was going to feel it either on the front end or the back end. So might as well do what works better. And the reality is that you just can't escape the trapped teammate, stranded stranger dynamic. It's going to be part of your marriage. But you can learn how to minimize the pain and work as a united team.
Yeah.
And eventually, that's what we were able to do. And things have been much better in our marriage. Wouldn't you agree, honey?
I totally agree.
Yeah. Now, don't get us wrong. We aren't saying that every single little decision needs to be discussed with each other.
That's true.
But you do need to work together to agree on what kinds of decisions need to be brainstormed as a team and which ones are a big deal and which ones aren't.
Yeah, that's right. You kind of learn that over a little bit of time. All right. Well, let's get into our final do, which is find a process to develop good decisions together.
Oh, yeah. And this is basically what we've been doing over the years.
Yeah.
We intentionally discovered a couple of effective processes so that we could engage in problem solving and stay united. So let's unpack this a bit, honey.
Yeah, let's do that. To develop a good decision-making process together, you've got to be able to problem solve as a team. So we'll say someone's requesting something. It might be that one of your kids or a former spouse needs something from you, and they want you to make a decision. And many times this creates some kind of a dilemma or a problem.
Yeah. So Annika feeling crummy on our camping trip, and she wants some extended phone time. And now I have a problem because we've already made an agreement and a boundary, and now I need to make a decision.
Right. And before the trip, we'd actually done a good job of coming together and making a united decision around how much phone time Annika would get while we were traveling. We had a pretty solid plan, and we were in full agreement.
Yep. But of course, we know that things don't always go as planned.
What?
And this is where things can quickly go sideways, especially when we're feeling the pressure and emotion. But instead of making a snap decision on my own, I wish that I would have invited you, honey, into the problem to help me work through the pressure and the emotion I was experiencing and to go back to the drawing board around that original decision. Sometimes we need to be flexible. It's just like a kid or an ex to throw a wrench into our well-laid plans, right? But we still need to work together and reconsider our decisions and brainstorm new ways to approach the problem.
Yeah. You use the word brainstorm right there, honey. And we've gotten pretty good at brainstorming over the years around a whole variety of problems and issues that we've run into. But back then, we hadn't really developed that skill yet, and we were still struggling with some problem solving.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And the skill of problem solving is one that we get to teach to couples all the time. And the first thing we ask them to think about is this. When it comes to problem solving as a couple, how many ideas or opinions do you think the average couple comes up with when they're in this brainstorming process?
Oh, yeah. And this one's kind of a no-brainer. They always get the answer right. It's 2.
Yeah. Your way and my way. Yeah, that's great. Now let's arm wrestle over who's going to win, right? And that's where most of us end up. We each get high-centered on what we believe is the right decision, and that leads couples into a competition mindset. They're fighting against each other to get their way because there's only 2 options, and these 2 individuals believe that their idea is the right idea. And this is not effective brainstorming because we just get stuck in our own perspective and opinions.
Yeah, and we often get stuck in our own pain, too.
Yeah.
But what we really need to do in the moment of decision making is to move from competing against each other to collaborating with each other to solve the problem.
I love it.
Yeah. Now, we teach a 5-step problem-solving process that's been working wonders for couples that we've coached. But here's a little hack that's just one piece of the process. Challenge yourselves to expand your brainstorming beyond the 2 ideas that you find yourself arguing over, right?
Yep.
Instead, focus on coming up with at least a minimum of 6 unique possible solutions to your problem.
Oh, that's right. This is my favorite piece of the overall problem-solving process because it does 2 things. First, it gets us to be more creative in our problem solving. Once we get to idea like number 4 and beyond that, our creative brain starts to kick in and we come up with some better ideas than we ever would have otherwise.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. And second, it actually helps us to already build some unity as a couple because now we're tackling a whole new problem together. We've got this challenge that we've got to come up with 6 ideas, right? That's a whole problem in itself.
Yeah, we're working together on that.
Yeah. And it helps to keep us on the same team, so to speak. And so if your spouse isn't listening right now, here's a little hack that you can use to approach this hack. Okay? So next time you're arguing over your 2 ideas of how you want to solve a problem, they think this and I think that, you just stop and maybe say something like, hey, what if it wasn't possible for us to do either one of these things? What might we do then? Right? So gets us out of that locked in mindset and starts to come up with some creative new ideas. A question like that can get you out of conflict and start to move back toward being on the same team while you're trying to solve the problem.
That's right. When we discovered an effective process that helps us to work together and come up with solutions we can both live with and agree on and make a decision that best solves the problem, it radically changed our marriage.
Totally.
Instead of our decision-making being all about getting our own way, we became focused on making good and solid decisions as a team.
Yep. Now, you might be thinking that sounds like it's going to take a lot of time to collaborate and brainstorm different ideas and make united decisions. And, kind of you're right. We're suggesting that you're intentional and proactive, which is going to take some energy and some effort. But think about it in the bigger picture. This is going to save you a lot of time and a lot of pain. How much time and energy are you already spending arguing and being upset with each other or pulling away or shutting down on each other when you're stuck feeling like a trapped teammate or a stranded stranger? How much time and energy is getting sucked up there? Engaging together in a process to effectively develop good decisions is incredibly beneficial to your marriage because you're going to be working as a team, and to your family because overall everybody gets to experience more peace.
Right.
And you're going to minimize the stranded stranger trap teammate dynamic, altogether. You won't eradicate it, but you'll minimize it. Now tell me that's not worth putting a little bit of time and energy into.
So worth it.
Yeah.
And once you develop an effective process and practical brainstorming and learn how to make united decisions, you'll be surprised at how you'll be able to hone this skill, because that's what it is. It's a skill.
Yeah.
And get really good at solving problems together.
Yeah.
We can do brainstorming, honey. We can have a session in minutes now.
Yeah, totally.
We can collaborate even when we each have different perspectives and ideas of what might be the right decision. And you can also develop this skill and master it as well in your own marriage. And guess what? It's going to make a huge difference in your relationship. All right. So before we wrap up, let me just share the outcome of my dilemma with Annika and our swimsuit shopping expedition. So I was able to hold firm with Annika and honor our family's budget. Now, she got really upset with me, and I had to patiently do some emotion coaching with her to help her work through her disappointment. But we were able to find a really cute, appropriate suit for her at Target, which she wore all summer. And those fears that I was struggling with, that she'd think less of me because I didn't give her what she wanted and what her stepmom did give her. You know what? All of those fears were pretty irrational. And none of that happened. My decision to stick with our decision didn't cause harm to my relationship with my daughter.
Yeah.
It really didn't.
And ultimately, you were able to be a good example for her for responsible money management and self-control and those kinds of things as well. And you were able to not succumb to the pressure.
Right.
You were able to give yourself a little space and time to really think through how you were going to approach that. And ultimately, you avoided probably some pretty big conflict that might have come.
Yeah, I stuck to the agreement.
That's right. And ultimately, Annika learned that she could be content and she didn't need to overspend. And she outgrew that suit a year later. So I'm so glad we only spent $35 on it, right? And in this case, you just simply stuck with the agreement that you and I had already made.
Right. It wasn't easy, but you can do it.
Yeah. And the world didn't come to an end.
Right. Exactly.
So let's recap real quick these do's and don'ts. First, the don'ts.
Don't succumb to pressure. Don't avoid. And don't overreact.
That's right. And the do's: do stay connected as a couple and as a family. Do invite your spouse into the decision-making process. And do engage together in a real process to develop good decisions. Now, all those do's might sound sort of similar, but if you go back and listen again, there's a lot of nuances to each of them that you're going to really want to pay attention to. So those are some practical ways that we can minimize the trapped teammate, stranded stranger experience when we're in the middle of decision-making process together. Now, I just want to remind you, you're going to want to come back here in just a couple of weeks where we're going to be talking about how to make good decisions when negotiations with the ex get heated. So make sure you come back for that. But until then, that's going to make this episode a wrap.
Until next time.